ليس بمهارة منا ولا حيلة ولا تفوق، إنما هو محض فضل الله سبحانه وتعالى. والله سبحانه وتعالى يختص برحمته من يشاء، والله سبحانه وتعالى ينظر في قلوب عباده فيصطفي منهم ما يكون أهلا لفضله ولرحمته ولنعمه. فهؤلاء الإخوة 19 الذين خرجوا وبذلوا وقدموا أرواحهم في سبيل الله، من الله سبحانه وتعالى عليهم بهذا الفتح الذي نتمتع به نحن الآن. والناظر في أحوال هؤلاء الإخوة يرى أنه يعني لا مقارنة بين قوة 19 رجلا وبين قوة أمريكا، ولا تناسب بين قوة 19 رجلا وبين الخسائر التي حدثت في أمريكا.
Course of events on September 11th are presumably well known. There is hardly a terrorist attack in history that has been more studied and analyzed than the 9/11 attacks. This overview will not go through the timeline or details of the attacks, but concentrates on the attack perpetrators and their link with Afghanistan. In terms of recruitment, the 9/11 hijackers can roughly be divided into 3 groups. The initial selectees, including 2 Saudis, Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi, were supposed to obtain pilot training, but who eventually became muscle hijackers. They were from the same generation al-Qaeda members as East Africa operatives Azam and al-Ohali and most of the USS Cole bombers. They became radicalized in the first half of the 1990s and fought classical jihad in Bosnia before joining bin Laden in Afghanistan, presumably in 1996 or 1997. They were appointed to be part of the 9/11 plot in spring of 1999. Bin Laden, Abu Hafs al-Masri, and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed started planning for the 9/11 attacks. The second group of recruits were the Hamburg cell, comprised of 4 Arab students in Hamburg, Germany: Mohammed Atta from Egypt, Ramzi bin al-Shib from Yemen, Marwan al-Shehi from the Emirates, and Ziad Jarrah from Lebanon. They were originally motivated to go to Chechnya to fight, but ended up going to Afghanistan in late 1999. Here, they were approached and recruited by bin Laden. 3 of the 4 Hamburg cell members became pilots for the 9/11 attacks. The 4th, Ramzi bin al-Shib, failed to get a visa to the United States and instead became the cell's external coordinator. The 3rd group of recruits were the rest of the muscle hijackers who were recruited in Afghanistan between the mid-2000 and April of 2001. They were part of a larger contingent of recruits who came to Afghanistan after al-Qaeda had established its new training camp structure in Kandahar. By mid-2000, its training camp structure appeared to have been fully operational, with basic training in the Al-Farouk camp outside Kandahar, specialized training at Kandahar Airport, and various sites in Kabul, and systems for registration and evaluation of recruits. There was one 9/11 perpetrator not mentioned here, the 4th pilot, Saudi-born Hani Hanjour. He was in Afghanistan in the late 1980s to support the Mujahideen in the Afghan-Soviet War. Later, he moved to the United States, started pilot training in 1996, finally obtaining a commercial certificate in 1999. Spring of 2000, he went to Afghanistan to train in Al-Farouk, and this is when he was recruited by the 9/11 plotters. Hanjour likely replaced one of the original pilot hijackers. At least 3 other al-Qaeda operatives, the initial selectees, Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi, and the Hamburg cell member Ramzi bin al-Shib, had originally been appointed as pilots but failed along the way. Hanjour, with his pilot's license and long experience living in the United States, was the perfect candidate to fill the slot. The 9/11 hijackers differed from the recruits to the East Africa operation and the USS Cole attack in that only 2 of them actually had a previous career in al-Qaeda. The original selectees, Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi, have been in al-Qaeda since 1996-97 and presumably served in various positions, including frontline service with the Taliban. The rest got recruited shortly after their arrival to Afghanistan, and they were generally kept separate from the rest of al-Qaeda's cadre. Cell leader Mohammed Atta and the rest of the Hamburg cell were recruited shortly after arriving in Afghanistan in late 1999 and spent most of their time afterward preparing for 9/11. Some of the muscle hijackers received basic training in al-Farouk in late 2000, but it is unclear if this happened before or after their selection. After their selection, they were told to go home and obtain U.S. visas, then to return to Afghanistan for mission-specific training. This training was given by a private instructor in al-Qaeda's airport complex in late 2000 to early 2001. Afterward, it was shipped to the United States. In other words, the hijackers were kept separate from the rest of al-Qaeda's organizational structure in Afghanistan. This makes sense because of the need to keep the operation secret. It also illustrates how al-Qaeda had become more professional in planning international terrorist attacks with a small footprint in Afghanistan. Al-Qaeda's international terrorist attacks in 1998 to 2001 were secretive operations. Only a few senior al-Qaeda members were involved in the planning attacks. The operations were coordinated by Abu Hafs al-Masri, al-Qaeda's military chief, or Osama bin Laden himself. He appointed a chief for the operation, Abu Muhammad al-Masri, for East Africa, Bashir al-Nashiri for the USS Cole, and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed for 9/11. The international terrorist campaign itself was compartmentalized to the extent that al-Nashiri probably did not know about Khalid Sheikh Mohammed's planning attack, and vice versa. Bin Laden or Abu Hafs al-Masri usually selected suicide operatives and gave them training in Afghanistan when appropriate. The exception, it seems, is the USS Cole attack, in which al-Nashiri may have selected the suicide operatives without bin Laden's approval. Abu Hafs al-Masri also appointed key personnel to give technical assistance whenever appropriate. In the 1998 attack on the U.S. embassies, the chief bomb maker, al-Mujahid, traveled outside Afghanistan to give assistance. After 1998, when al-Qaeda tightened its security, mission-specific training was given inside Afghanistan, usually at al-Qaeda's special facility in the Kandahar airport. Over time, al-Qaeda leadership increasingly relied on outsiders to plan and carry out international attacks. By outsiders, I mean militants who were not part of al-Qaeda's cadre development program. Cadre would follow specific training courses and serve in various positions on the front line as guest house managers or in al-Qaeda's guard force. He would eventually fill senior positions in the organization. The international terrorist campaign was organized separately by a small elite within the organization and relied on newly arrived recruits to execute the operation. If we study al-Qaeda's terrorist campaign in isolation, we see a highly professional network with international reach and adeptness at operational security. But when we see it in relation with al-Qaeda's other activities in Afghanistan, we see the contours of a dual strategy.